Hi everyone, hope you're well. Chris Cowlin here. Now before we get into it, I'd just like to inform you about a new website selling quality current and retro Spurs jerseys, okjersey.com. They sell all current and retro Tottenham Hotspur shirts in all sizes. They sell the current fan and player versions as well as the 80s and 90s retro shirts, including my very favourite, the 1991 FA Cup final shirt. You can order very easily from okjersey.com, and if you use the code Chris, you will receive an 8% discount off your final order. You can also use the QR code on the top left of your screen. And by the way, they also have some training wear here and the 25-26 colour special edition jersey. Hello, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of Premier League predictions. We'll be talking about Matchweek 18, which of course is coming up after Christmas, and happy Christmas by the way. My name is Chris Cowlin, and today I'll be joined by Gareth McGuinness as we will be predicting the scores for Matchweek 18. We're live on YouTube, live on Facebook and X. Please do get involved and let us know your score predictions ahead of these games. Now at Christmas, Arsenal are top, 39 points from 17 games. Manchester City are just behind, 2 points behind in fact. Aston Villa are third, 3 points from the top. Chelsea sitting in fourth with 29 points. Liverpool in fifth after their win at Spurs at the weekend. They also have 29 points. Spurs are 14th at Christmas. Three places above 17th, where of course we finished last season under Postecoglou, and West Ham, Burnley and Wolves are sitting in the bottom three at the festive break. Wolves are still winless this season. Now on Boxing Day there will be only one game taking place this year. Manchester United host Newcastle. On Saturday the 27th, Nottingham Forest will play Manchester City in the early kickoff, 12:30, and then there will be 5 3 p.m. kickoffs. Arsenal take on Brighton, Brentford against Bournemouth, Burnley against Everton, Liverpool against Wolves, and West Ham host Fulham. And then there will be a late kickoff on Saturday, 27th of December. Chelsea will play Aston Villa, 4th v 3rd. That'll be an entertaining one, I think. On Sunday, 2 games will take place. Sunderland against Leeds, and then Crystal Palace will host Spurs at Selhurst Park. And then match week 19 starts pretty much a couple of days later on Tuesday, the 30th of December. This is a very, very busy period in the Premier League, and some managers will be under pressure. Now, talking about managers being under pressure, Gareth McGuinness is with me. Gareth, how are you?
All good, Chris. It's Christmas time. It should be a time to celebrate. But if you're a Tottenham fan at the minute, you have to try and put football to one side and focus on other things. But look, just before we start, just echo what you said there. Happy Christmas to all of yours. And Chris, I know you're very close to 200,000. So if we can get anyone watching, smash that subscribe button and try and get Chris a lovely Christmas present up to 200,000 subscribers, which would be incredible. But Match week 18 is here, Chris. I think we should just forget about match week 17 and move on to match week 18.
Gareth, just let's talk a little bit, even if it's just a minute or two, about match week 17. Who impressed you, who didn't impress you? And I suppose we ought to speak a little bit, just a little bit, about the Spurs v Liverpool game.
Yeah, look, going on to match week 17, that was probably the highlight fixture in terms of Tottenham Liverpool. You know, we done the stats, and there were games that usually have a lot of goals, or usually very entertaining games. And I have to say, the first half was pretty dull. It's probably the dullest Spurs Liverpool game I can remember in the league. Certainly, there wasn't really any chances in that first half, bar the very end. I think when Vicario made that save after Xavi Simons got sent off. Well, there's a lot of talk about the decisions, Chris. I think Xavi Simons, unfortunately, is a red card. I think it's clumsy. I don't think he actually meant to do it, but it's a clumsy one. And I've seen red cards given for similar. Although Van Dijk done something very similar on Solanke and only got a booking last season, if you remember. The Romero one was complete. He was an idiot for getting himself sent off. There was actually, when he was on his yellow card, there was a chance where he actually brought somebody down late, and the referee played advantage, or I think he would have been sent off then. And I says, my mate's a Liverpool fan sitting next to me in the pub, and I says, Christian Romero will not see this game out. And that was in the 70th minute. I said that. And you just knew it was coming. And it was stupid what he did because Spurs were actually in the ascendancy at that period. And look, 10v11, in my opinion, you can still maybe get a result. 9v11, I think it's very, very difficult. Although Spurs did quite well in that period towards the end. The second goal for me, Chris, I think, as a foul. I can understand why Romero's disappointed with the decision, but he has to be professional. Once the decision's made, you have to get on with it. But 2 hands in the back, usually 99 times out of 100, that is given as a foul. Yes, Romero was a bit theatrical, but we've seen those given time and time again, and usually the defender or a goalkeeper gets a little bit more protection in the box. So I think we've had a couple of anomaly decisions in recent weeks. If you think back to the Newcastle penalty that Newcastle got, that's very rarely given as a penalty, and I think in this case, more often than not, those goals are disallowed. But look, it was an interesting one. I didn't think Liverpool were great, Chris. We spoke about them going into the game. Yes, they're a big name, but they're one of the worst teams I've seen at the stadium this season. That game was there for the taking, and Spurs didn't really do anything in that first half. They took the game by the scruff of the neck. The game kind of drifted, and then a crazy mistake from Romero for the first goal. A poor refereeing decision, if we're honest, for the second goal, and then Romero doubles down on his first mistake with a pass and gets himself sent off. And look, it was a good fight back. Richarlison come on and caused a bit of chaos, but it just makes you think. 9v11, how Liverpool were so rattled and so nervous, and we've seen that in recent weeks. You think about the Leeds game away from home. Once they have that one setback, it's almost like they get so nervous and they don't know how to control games. And Spurs blew an opportunity, in my opinion, Chris, for 3 points. And I do think that was our best opportunity of getting 3 points over this Christmas period.
Yeah, now just touching on Matchweek 17, there were wins for Leeds United, a big win against Crystal Palace. They won 4-1. Arsenal, of course, won away at Everton. Liverpool winning away at Spurs. Brentford winning away at Wolves. Manchester City beating West Ham 3-0 in the Premier League at the Etihad. And there were also wins for Aston Villa and Fulham. That was Aston Villa's 10th consecutive win under Emery. Incredible run that they are on. Gareth, before we get into it, just give me a very, very quick answer. Are Aston Villa in the title race?
At the moment, yes, because of Morgan Rogers' form. But if that is going to be very difficult for him to sustain that form, because he's a great player, but it's almost like he's having a Gareth Bale season where everything he's hits at the mont's going under the net. But if he continues on that form, I think it's great news for England as well, because we're talking about one of the most informed players around the world at the moment, and he just looks like he's playing with so much confidence. So I would personally love to see Aston Villa win the league, because Spurs are not involved in this title race. So I hope so, Chris, but I think by the end it's going to be between Arsenal and Man City.
There seems to be that little bit of a gap now. First, second and third. There's 3 points separating third place Aston Villa to league leaders Arsenal right now. And then you've got Chelsea and Liverpool on 29 points from 17. So they're 10 points away from Arsenal right now. Could Liverpool get into this title race?
No chance. Absolutely no chance from what I've seen on Saturday and in recent weeks. They're conceding too many goals. I think any good team, Chris, controls that game 2-0 up with 15 minutes or so left in the game versus 10 men. And then then you think about injury time. There was 9 or 10 minutes added on. Then they were playing against 9 men and they still couldn't manage it. So, no, for me, Liverpool, I think we're very fortunate they won the game. I think decisions went their way. Although Spurs, we kept making any excuses because we didn't play well. But it looked to me, Chris, like two very average mid-table teams playing each other. So I think Liverpool have a battle on their hands for the top 5. If it is going to be 5th spot to get you into the Champions League as well, I still think Man United are more likely than Liverpool. Aston Villa, just quickly, again, Chelsea away and Arsenal away next. If they won those 2 games, they're definitely in the title race.
I'll tell you what, it would certainly be interesting if Aston Villa continued this form, and Aston Villa, Manchester City and Arsenal, of course, all battle it out. Of course, we don't want the Premier League title going to our North London rivals. We'd much rather City or Aston Villa win it. So best of luck to both of those clubs. How
good would it be if Aston Villa popped Arsenal by a point and Unai Emery was holding up that Premier League trophy? It would be so... I mean, the meltdown in the other half of North London would be insane.
Yep, incredible. Right, Gareth, let's kick things off. One Boxing Day game this year, which is going to seem very strange to all of us Premier League football fans. Now, this is the first Boxing Day in Premier League history to see as little as one game being played. It is between the team with the most Boxing Day wins in the competition, Manchester United with 22, and the team with the joint most Boxing Day defeats, Newcastle, with 16. Now, Manchester United are 7th at the moment, 3 points from the top 4. Newcastle are down in 11th, 6 points away from the top 4. How do you see this one going?
Well, first of all, I think, Chris, this is our 18th show this season on these. I think that's the best stat you've given. How did you find that one? That is a fantastic stat. So fair play to you for that. Because I don't know where you found that one, but that is brilliant. Chris, look, mixed opinions on this Boxing Day thing. You know, at the start, when it came out, there was only going to be one game. I was furious because it's a good time to be around family, and you know, a lot of people are off work, and you'd love to see games on from sort of 12:30 right through to 10 o'clock, with 8 o'clock being the last game. But I think it gives a lot of fans an opportunity to maybe go and watch their local team playing on Boxing Day, as there's going to be really very little Premier League football. So it might benefit the lower leagues and, you know, non-league games. So I would love to see an increased capacity at those games. But in terms of the game, I think Man United have definitely turned the corner. Maybe not the results, obviously losing to Aston Villa. But you think, Chris, you know, we've heard Thomas Frank made a lot of excuses about players being missing. You know, Ahmad was missing in that game against Aston Villa. And Mbeumo's is also missing. Both of those have went to the AFCON. Bruno Fernandes, who's been one of the best players in the Premier League this season, came off at half-time. And you still seen Man United's style of play coming through. I think credit to the manager, he's finally changed away from that sort of dogmatic system that he had, and it's definitely improving. So it's suiting a lot more of the players. So it's a bit like what we used to see with Thomas Frank. He's not really adapted the likes of Xavi Simons and the strengths that he can give us because we're playing so defensive. And we've mentioned Bentancur's stats to death about him playing backwards a lot. So I think Amram deserves a lot of credit. And United at the minute look a real threat to those teams. Pushing for the top 4, top 5. Newcastle away from home. That record, Chris, is getting worse. What United's best performances in recent times have also come away from home. So it's, you know, you think about Everton at home, 10 men. They lost that game, Man United. West Ham at home, 1-1. Bournemouth at home, 4-4. So they haven't won at home for a few weeks, Man United, and maybe it'd be a good time for Newcastle to go there. But it's very strange what's happening with Newcastle, Chris. 1 week we see them, you know, that first half against Chelsea, put Chelsea on the back foot, and then away from home, they can't seem to be able to get up for the game. It's almost like watching two different sides at the minute. So I think this is a really difficult one to call. You know, United without Mbeumo, Ahmad, and possibly Bruno Fernandes is not the same Man United team. So Newcastle will have a better opportunity to maybe end this away record hoodoo at the moment.
Well, Manchester United have lost 4 of their last 5 Premier League games against Newcastle, winning only 1, as many as they had in their previous 38 against the Magpies, winning 25 and drawing 9. And Manchester United have won all 3 of their Premier League Boxing Day games against Newcastle, with all 3 coming under different managers. 4-3 in 2012, which was under Ferguson, 3-1 in 2014 under Van Gaal, and 4-1 in 2019 under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw, Gareth. What are you going to go for?
I was going to say, Chris, that there's no way you're going to go against that stat, but you have. And I actually was going to say that we're going to have a different idea here, but we've nailed on the same result, 2-2 as well.
Wow. It is scary the amount of times that we've been agreeing these past few weeks. I don't know what's going on. Right. Let's get on to the next fixture. Of course, takes place the early kickoff. Nottingham Forest take on Manchester City on Saturday the 27th. Nottingham Forest at the moment, they have 18 points. Manchester City have 37 points. Forest are 17th. City are 2nd. Clearly in the title race again. Gareth, what have you made of the job that Sean Dyche has done at Forest at the City ground? Of course, you know, we were on the back end of a 3-0 defeat, only a week or so ago. And Pep Guardiola, can he guide City to another Premier League title?
Yeah, I actually watched the Fulham and Nottingham Forest game on Monday night, so I can talk a bit about Forest about that. But it was like watching again two different Forest teams. Fulham nullified them, didn't give them any. I think Sean Dyche just created absolutely nothing in the game really, and it was a comfortable 1-0 win for Fulham. There wasn't an awful lot of chances in the game. It wasn't a particularly great watch, but it was like Forest absolutely had Spurs where they wanted them. They ran them under the ground and bullied them, and it was a probably the most comfortable one that Forest will have all season. So I think it brought Forest down a peg. Sean Dyche was disappointed because he probably thought that the Spurs result would be a good way to set them up over Christmas. But I think Forest are now one of those teams at home. They just seem they turn up a lot more than they do away from home. So I think this will be a difficult game for Man City. 12:30 game as well is never easy to negotiate. But again, we keep speaking about these two players, especially the first one, Erling Haaland. Again, another couple of goals last week. 19 goals in 17 Premier League games. He's on course to break his own record of the most goals in a league season. And I actually looked at the stats this week, Chris. I think Arsenal have scored 31 goals. Man City have scored 41. So there's 10 goal difference already. And I think a team that's 10 goals ahead of its rival, it tells you a lot about, they're winning games by quite big margins when they're turning up. Whereas Arsenal at the minute are kind of scraping through. So I think there'll be a lot of worry in North London from Arsenal about how Man City are sweeping teams aside at the moment. And if they go to Forest and one, which we know is a difficult game for most teams, that'll put Arsenal bang under pressure when they play later on the 27th. So I'm erring on the side of a more of a tight Man City one, Chris. I don't think it'll be as comfortable as it was against West Ham, but I do expect Man City because I think they usually had form when they won league seasons, Chris. It's usually Christmas onwards where they find their best form. And Phil Foden, the other player we're going to mention, he's in great form at the minute as well. And Thomas Tuchel must be scratching his head at the minute about how he's going to fuck all these players in for the World Cup, because if you've got Foden in this form and Morgan Rogers in this form, what do you do with Jude Bellingham? But Bukayo Saka, he's been injured. Does he play? So many big decisions for Tuchel to make, and he'll just be desperate that these players stay in form. But I think Man City at the moment have too many guns, Chris, for Forest.
For anyone putting their money on Manchester City winning the Premier League this season, Gareth, I think this stat, and you alluded to it here, Manchester City haven't lost any of their last 10 Premier League matches played between Christmas and New Year, winning 8 and losing 2, since losing 3-2 to Wolves on the 27th of December in the 19-20 campaign. But as you said there, we know that City, particularly under Pep Guardiola, and we've seen it so many times, they can go on a run with consecutive wins and play some great football.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing from Man City is putting Arsenal under real pressure, because Arsenal are struggling at the moment. Just they're getting over the line, and they've had some good fortune in recent weeks. We think about the own goals against Wolves, the penalty against Everton. One in a game, 1-0 by a penalty. Even look at the League Cup quarter-final this week, another own goal by a Palace player. So the goals at the minute aren't there with Arsenal. And if you look at the difference in the attacking options at the minute, Saka hasn't really been able to get on a good run because of injuries. Gyökeres hasn't really worked out. He's nowhere near the level of an Erling Haaland. Phil Foden scoring a lot of goals. Doku's having a great season. So there's definitely going to be a lot of stress in that Arsenal camp at the minute, because we says a few weeks ago, Chris, it was really important in that sort of October-November period for Arsenal to try and put themselves in a good place where they're maybe 8-9 points ahead of Man City. But they haven't been able to do that. Too many draws, and they could easily be sitting second in the league now, only for a bit of good fortune. So I think at the minute, based on what we're seeing, and this is nothing to do with a Tottenham connection, Man City are the favourites, and I think experience counts for a lot in this title run. And Man City have that in abundance. They know how to get over the line. I think the League Cup could be interesting, Chris. Arsenal and Man City could meet in the final in March, and I think that could be psychologically a good opportunity for one of them to deal a blow to the R.
Yeah, very true. Well, only Wolves 10 have failed to score in more different Premier League games than Nottingham Forest this season, which is 9. I don't expect them to score against City on Saturday. I'm going to go for a 2-0 City win. What are you going to go for?
I think it'll be tighter than that, but I do expect Man City to win. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Man City win.
Okay, right. Next up, Gareth, is the 3 p.m. kickoff. Arsenal take on Brighton. What have you made of Arsenal in these last couple of games?
Yeah, a little bit there, Chris. I've had the freedom to watch them over the last few weeks more closely. I was very unimpressed with them against Wolves. I think they were very fortunate they won that game. They didn't really create anything in that second half, and the two own goals bailed them out. And if you remember, at 1-0, it was Wolves that were doing all the pushing, and you could maybe sense that there was a goal coming for Wolves if they believed in themselves, and they did. Again, just a bit of bad luck for Wolves. It's been that type of season, and good fortune for Arsenal. The Everton game, we knew it was going to be tough. I think both of us says 1-0 Arsenal, and they found a way on via a penalty. And then the League Cup game this week, Chris. You need to remember, Crystal Palace have played a lot of football over the last few weeks, and yes, in the first half they dominated possession. The keeper made a few saves, but again in that second half, it was Palace that were asking a lot of the questions. Again, I think they one cleared off the line just before Arsenal got the own goal at the other end. So again, Palace could have easily have found themselves in that semi-final. So I think at the minute, Arsenal fans will say it's a sign of a title-winning team, but I don't like that statement. I'd rather be winning games more comfortable, because that will not continue week on, week out. It's the stats at the minute are quite crazy that they're getting so many own goals. That will run out at some stage, and I just think at the minute, Chris, some of their top players, especially in the attacking third, aren't in great form. And I think they won league titles. You have to have players in good form at the top end of the pitch. They have to find a way. Saka, to me, Chris, still looks like he's carrying an injury. He's had a lot of trouble with that knee or that leg, and it seems like any kind of contact, he's down and he needs the physio on. So I don't know whether Arteta's pushing him back onto the pitch because he knows how big a player he is. Martinelli, Trossard, and Matchweek are all very inconsistent players. I don't think they're the type of players that can carry the league title. Havertz hasn't been able to get back from his injury yet. He keeps having setbacks, about like what we're having with Solanke and Kulusevski. And Gyökeres just hasn't worked so far. I know we got that penalty last week, but from an open play, Chris, he looks physically off it. He looks to be physically struggling with this league. So that to me, he looks already like he's not going to suit the Premier League. Maybe it's about too quick for him at the minute. So I think Arsenal fans will be very worried. Yes, they'll be happy they're getting results, but I think the way they're winning games, it feels like they're getting a lot of things against the grain. So, and another thing that's come out, Chris, in the last few weeks, and Arsenal fans have been saying the football's boring to watch, and we've been saying this about Spurs at times. So only they are getting results. I think Arteta will be under pressure because for how much talent he's got there, they're not a pretty watch. It's very dogged and a heavy reliance on set pieces.
Who would your money be on who's going to win the Premier League this season?
Yeah, I think Man City at the minute look clear favourites, just based on the goals they're scoring and the way they're dispatching teams. They've got better players in the attacking third on form at the moment as well. And Pep's been there and done it. And you can sense every game with Arsenal now, Chris, there's nerves there. It all feels very nervy, and we've a long way to go. We're only just hitting the halfway line. And I think if it goes into the last 7 or 8 games in Man City or if they're both neck and neck, you bet your house on Man City, wouldn't you? Because they know how to get over the line. And Arsenal have this, record of doing the unthinkable, and that's gifting the league title to Man City. They've it's not just that Arsenal have previous of choking at the end. They've also choked against Man City and these title races. So Man City know that in the back of their head. So I think the League Cup's going to be massive. I think Arsenal would have a better chance of winning the Premier League if they get their hands on some silverware in March, because it takes a little bit of pressure off and it gets that wee bit of winning mentality into the group. For all we've said about Arsenal being a good side, they haven't tested that yet. So yeah, my money's on Man City at the moment. And Arsenal have it all to prove still.
So you think that Arsenal will finish second again?
Yes.
Okay, right. In this fixture last season, both home and away games finished 1-1, and Arsenal have already faced Brighton this season in the League Cup, beating them 2-0 back in October. And Arsenal have won just 3 of their 8 Premier League home games against Brighton. That's 38%, drawing 2 and losing 3, only having a lower win rate against Wimbledon, 25%, and Liverpool, 36%, among sides they have faced 5+ more times. I am going to go for a 1-0 Arsenal win. I think they're going to scrape it.
I think just based on what we've seen, and I think playing midweek, and Brighton have had the a few days extra rest. I think Brighton might get a result in this game.
Really?
They've been a bit unfortunate in the last few weeks. I remember the game at Liverpool. I think they had over a 2 xG. They just missed a lot of chances in the game. So I think Brighton are due a bit of good fortune against one of these bigger sides, and it might be in this game. So I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw, Chris. I should just say, Chris, when we're speaking about Man City there, it looks nailed on that Semenyo is going to be going to Man City now. And I think they bring a player like Adam in January, gives everyone a lift, and he's a good player in form. And I think the fact that it's well known, Chris, that Semenyo's got the pick of all the teams, and the fact that he's picking Man City tells you everything. He probably believes Man City are favourites.
Gareth, many reports are stating that Semenyo is going to be on his way to Manchester City. Is that the right destination for him?
If we're taking everything out in terms of not being biased, I think Man City are the team that's likely to win the Premier League now this season, so I can see why he's going there. Pep Guardiola is the best coach in the league by far, in my opinion. The only thing you would, as that an insight, and then maybe Pep will stay, because there has been a few reports that he may step down. He may step down at the end of the season. But if they're bringing in top quality players like that, Pep might stick around for a bit longer, because I'm sure the players that are going in there are asking, is Pep going to be in charge this time next season? So maybe that's an insight into that. So if you think about that front three, Chris, Semenyo on one side, Doku on the other, and Haaland, I mean, that is piss power, and no defence will look forward to playing Man City with that front three.
With the teams interested, though, Gareth, is that the best destination for Semenyo? Of course, us as Spurs fans would love to see him at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. We could do with, someone of this quality in our team. But, as far as game time is concerned, you think he's going to get a lot of game time at City?
Yeah, I think they'll probably play him off the right-hand side. They'll probably play Doku off the left and Haaland up top. But look, Man City have a lot of games. They're going to have a League Cup semi-final as well. Pep does tend to rotate his squad quite a lot, especially in those cup games. I'm sure he'll be keen to avoid the Champions League playoff, because if they obviously 2 more games in January, they'll want to try and get through automatically. But if they don't, there's another 2 games where he can rotate. So, and you've got the FA Cup coming up. So Man City players are never short on game time. Pep and I think that's the key difference as well. Pep trusts his squad a lot more than Arteta does. Arteta tends to pick the same team quite a lot, and that's why we've seen in the second half of seasons a lot of injuries happening at Arsenal, and same things happening this season as well. Saka again keeps on getting injured. Pep knows how to rotate. The one question mark with Man City is the defence, but I'll be shocked if they didn't sign a centre half in January. I think they'll go out now. They'll get Semenyo wrapped up early, and they'll probably try and go and get a centre back of top quality. Mark Guéhi's out there possibly available. If they were to get Guéhi and Semenyo, you may as well hand that league over now, I think.
Another 3 p.m. kickoff on Saturday will be Brentford hosting Bournemouth. Brentford are currently 12th. Bournemouth are in 15th. Gareth, let's start off by talking about the league positions. I know it's very tight in there in the middle at the moment, but are you surprised by the league positions of either side, 12th to 15th?
Well, these are 2 of our rivals, Chris, aren't they? Brentford and Bournemouth. Right on Brentford, I think, are what you see is what you get, doesn't it? I think what's been really, really positive for Brentford has been no drop-off from losing Thomas Frank and Mbumo. Ivan Toney he's left it last year. Vasa, Norgard, the captain. They lose all those players in the space of 12 to 18 months is, really impressive. Thomas Frank, whilst we've been critical, he did a brilliant job at Brentford. And it just seems like it's continued on with Keith Andrews. I think, Keith Andrews is well respected in the game. There was a lot of question marks about him when he was going on there, but a lot of ex-players have played alongside him, and people have done punditry work, says, this man, he knows his football. And I think that's been proven. I also like Keith Andrews, not just because he's Irish, Chris, but he's very honest in his interviews. When Brentford haven't played well, he's very, very honest with the press and says, that wasn't good enough. And I've praised Ruben Amorim for saying that too. I love managers giving an honest assessment of a game. Sean Dyche again on Monday night, very honest. Fulham deserved the points. No excuses about referees. No excuses about injuries. There's 90 minutes out there, and you have to turn up and play with whatever team you've got. And Keith Andrews is very much like that. I think similar to what we says about Newcastle and Nottingham Forest, Brentford are very much a home team. Away from home, yes, they did beat Wolves last time out, but the majority of their points have been coming at home. Brentford, Chris, at the minute, or Bournemouth at the minute, I can't work them out. seems to be a lot of draws, and they haven't won for quite a few weeks now. But I think generally the fans are very happy with the direction they're going in because the football is very entertaining. They score a lot of goals. This talk around Semenyo has unsettled them a little bit, I think. But like where Newcastle were with Isak and Brentford were with Vasa, I think they'll just be glad to get this done now, maybe early, and it could be as early as New Year's Day, really, or the 2nd of January when that transfer window opens, that they can get that and move him on because although he scored against Manchester United, he hasn't been the same player over the last few weeks. I think he's probably their best player. So, Bournemouth are one of those teams that they will rely on individuals at times, despite having a good manager and a good style of play. This will be a test for them going to Brentford because we know Brentford's home form has been very, very strong. And you would have to say, Chris, on form at the minute, even though I'm a big fan of how Bournemouth play, I think Brentford come into this game as favourites.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Bournemouth have drawn quite a few games. Their last 3, in fact, at home against Chelsea 0-0, away at Manchester United 4-4, and most recently against Burnley 1-1. Brentford, however, they got back to winning ways last weekend, beating bottom of the side Wolves 2-0. And also, Brentford are unbeaten in their last 9 league games against Bournemouth, winning 7 and drawing 2, including all 6 meetings in the Premier League, winning 4 and drawing 2. I suppose, like you just said, Brentford will and probably should be favourites. Although I'm a big fan of Andoni Iraola and the style of football that he has. Andoni Iraola, before we get to score predictions, Andoni Iraola, does he remind you a little bit of Mauricio Pochettino?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you look at all the managers out there in the Premier League at the minute, and especially where Pochettino came from Southampton, he does remind you. And look, this isn't a critique of Thomas Frank's. Everyone's got their style of play, and look, but Iraola, I think, is more suited. It'll be an easier transition to a top club than it will be for a Thomas Frank because of the style of play. And we've seen this with Maresca at Leicester and Chelsea. Because Leicester played very much attacking football under him as well, he's a manager that can coach attacking phases of play. And I think Jamie Carragher alluded to this on Monday Night Football, that a lot of defensive coaches that have moved from a lower Premier League club to a top-end Premier League club have struggled. You think about Roy Hodgson at Liverpool, going from Fulham to Liverpool. It was a big jump, and it was too defensive. And he really, really struggled there, and he didn't even last 6 months, I don't think. David Moyes is another one. Is more of a pragmatic coach. Didn't work out at Manchester United, but he's done a really good job at every other Premier League team he's been at. And Thomas Frank is another one who I think if Thomas Frank left Spurs in a few weeks' time, if the results haven't improved, I think that will be the case. He could find his way maybe back at a lower Premier League team, and he'll probably do well, and we'll probably be turning around going, look at Thomas Frank now. But I think that's where he's probably suited to. So I think it'll be an easier transition for an Iraola, like it was with Pochettino, like it was for Brendan Rodgers when he left Swansea to go to Liverpool. Very much an attacking team that played good football. Swansea were at that time. And I think Iraola, because he's very attractive, and we've seen this with Vincent Kompany, Chris, when he went from Burnley to Bayern Munich. Vincent Kompany wouldn't have got the Bayern Munich job if he set up like previous Burnley managers. But Burnley tried to play on the front foot, and they were conceding goals and scoring goals, but they were just undone by the quality of this league the last time they were up here. But Bayern Munich seen something in what Kompany was doing, and that's why he got the Bayern Munich job. So, yes, I think a lot of teams will be looking at Iraola and think, with better players, his football could even improve. So I definitely think Iraola will be high on a lot of teams' shortlist around Europe. And as you say, another man, he's very passionate as well, Chris, and I like that. Very passionate on the side. He's a great watch. And look, Bournemouth, I have a bit of a soft spot for Bournemouth under Iraola. They're almost like the team I love watching and always look out for the results. So I really hope they can get back to winning ways soon. But I don't think it'll be this weekend.
I'm going to go for another Bournemouth draw. I'm going to go for 1-1. What are you going to go for?
I'm going to go for 2-1 Brentford.
Okay. Right, next up, Burnley against Everton. Burnley are currently 19th and Everton are mid-table in 10th. Against no side of Burnley won more Premier League games than they have against Everton, which is 7, though they did lose both meetings with the Toffees when they last faced them back in the 23-24 campaign. When you look at that bottom 3, Gareth, do you think that is going to be the bottom 3 at the end of the season? Because there seems to be a little bit of a gap opening up now.
Yeah, I think West Ham will be really, really worried at the minute. I think Wolves have probably accepted their fate that they're gone. They probably know, and it's resembled in their performances. Really, I think they look a beaten squad, and they probably know what's coming. And I think there's already been talk at Wolves that the January window is going to be about preparing for the Championship next season. Um, Burnley, I think as well, will probably be on the same. They're not completely done with yet, but I think they probably, if Burnley were having a conversation inside the camp about next season, they'll probably be believing that they're going to be in the Championship. And West Ham, because of how well Leeds have done in recent weeks, and Nottingham Forest as well, they've picked up quite a lot of points. It's put them on West Ham under real pressure, because they did have a little bit of a bounce when Nuno come in. I think the third and fourth games they won back to back, but they haven't really picked up enough points since. And I think is there a 5-point gap or 6-point gap there now, Chris?
Yeah, as I said, there's a gap now opening up at the top four, and there's a gap opening up now at the bottom, because Forest now have a 5-point gap between West Ham and the relegation zone.
Yeah, I mean, West Ham need a good Christmas period to get themselves back into this. If that starts stretching to 7, 8, 9 points, they're going to be in big trouble. They need to come out of that January period. Those games, the next 4 games or so, where they're within touch and distance of the next team in 17th. But I look at Forest's squad, Chris, and I just think I know we've seen it before, but I think that squad's a lot better than West Ham's, and I think it's too good to go down. I think they're going to win games. They've got goal scorers and around the team, and Sean Dyche is a very, very top. He knows how to get results in this league. So I think Forest are going to be fine. Leeds at the minute are riding the crest of a wave. They look like they can, with the form Calvert-Lewin's in at the minute, they look like they can win games. So I think West Ham are the team that's going to be worried the most. But Chris, I have to say this: if West Ham won a couple of games, the Spurs could be dragged into this, because Leeds are picking up points, Forest are picking up points. Spurs are the team that are on the real slide at the minute. So if this Christmas period doesn't go well, it could be very much at West Ham looking up at the next team. Could be Tottenham, and we play West Ham in the middle of January, so that could be a massive game as well. So Spurs need to start winning games as well, just to give themselves some breathing space. It's been a difficult season so far, but we don't want to be sitting here in a couple of months' time, in a relegation battle. We want to at least pull clear of that, so we can start planning ahead for next season. But West Ham at the minute will be really worried about their Premier League safety.
Everton, they won a couple of games, winning away at Bournemouth 1-0 and at home against Nottingham Forest 3-0. But their last 2, they've lost away at Chelsea and at home against Arsenal. What have you made of Everton this season, Gareth? Because sitting in 10th, they seem to be a bit up and down, a little bit inconsistent.
Very impressed with Everton, to be honest. I think David Moyes has done a fantastic job. I think the one thing that's holding Everton back is they haven't got a striker, really. Beto's not the answer. And the other player, Barry, he's new to the league. I think
it's ironic, though, isn't it? Because they let Calvert-Lewin go, and now he's banging the goals in for Leeds.
Yeah, and look, there was a lot of talk that Richarlison was being linked by a move there, but Richarlison's Tottenham's top goal scorer. They can't afford to let him go in January at the moment, because Solanke doesn't look like he's ready to come back. Muyani isn't scoring goals, really, apart from those couple he got against PSG. So we can't afford to let Richarlison go at the moment. So that may be one for the summer. But I think Everton will be in the market in January for a striker, because I think if they get a striker on, Chris, they've got Ndiaye to come back from the AFCON. Jack Grealish has been a brilliant signing for them. I think they can probably push for maybe a Europa League conference spot. And that would be brilliant for Everton to get back into Europe. And it's been a torrid few years for Everton. They've been sort of in those relegation battles or finishing in the bottom half of the table. They'll be trying to get back to where they were under Moyes the first time, which was knocking on the door of the Champions League. They've got the stadium now as well. So, no, I think Everton, if they have a decent January window and pick up some points over Christmas, so they're not too far off, they can definitely push for one of those European spots outside of the Champions League.
Where do you see Jack Grealish next season?
I don't think he'll be at Man City. So, I mean, he seems to be enjoying it at Everton. I think David Moyes is a good manager for him. Very much. David Moyes is very much like a Harry Redknapp type manager. I think he gets the best out of those type of players. No, I think Everton would be a good fit for him. And it would really help if they could make Europe, because I think Jack Grealish still has aspirations of playing in, at least in one of the European competitions. But, yeah, I think that would be a good move for him.
I'm going to go against the stats here. I'm going to go for a 2-0 away win, 2-0 Everton win. What are you going to go for?
just because of the players that Everton are missing and the lack of a striker, I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw.
Okay. Right, next up, Liverpool, who are now up to 5th against Wolves, who are still winless at Christmas. Now, Liverpool, as I mentioned earlier, are 10 points away from league leaders Arsenal right now. Gareth, I asked you whether they could be in that title race. You never know in football. You know, if they strung some results together, and they are in pretty decent form right now, winning away at Spurs last weekend. But Wolves, winless at Christmas. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I can't remember that ever being the case, because I know Derby only won one game when they finished on 11 points, but I think they won their game in October. So I can't remember ever a team winless at Christmas. But
will they win one? Will they win one this season?
It's looking increasingly unlikely. I said last week I thought Brentford was a massive chance to get that one because of the away form that Brentford have had, and I've mentioned that I think they've played Leeds at home, and they've played West Ham, I think, at home, and they've played Burnley at home. All those teams have went there and got results. So it's trying to find a team for them to beat at the moment. But look, if you think away from home against Spurs, they drew 1-1. Spurs scored in the last minute. Arsenal away, they were very close to a draw. So maybe these games are the easier ones for them because the pressure really is off. I think they're finding it really difficult at home. There's not many people turning up to the games, and the one that are there, Wolves are probably the only team in the league that's had more boos than Tottenham this year, because of the results in the football. So I think it probably suits them getting away from Wolves for a game, and they seem to be a bit more competitive in these away games. So maybe Liverpool will be a free hit for them. You know, you're saying there the return to form, but I think Liverpool have had better results than performances. I think a lot of those games that they picked up points in could have easily went the other way. So maybe Wolves, if they can find that level they found against Spurs and Arsenal, they can definitely give Liverpool a game, because Liverpool, as we know, Chris, they're very, very poor at the back, and they give Spurs some chances against 9 men last week. So I'd be shocked if Wolves did one, but I don't think it'll be as one-sided as what people may think.
Gareth, has the criticism amongst the Liverpool fans towards Arne Slot this season, has it been fair?
I think it has been fair, Chris, because you think about the level of player that had been brought in the summer. There was a massive expectation that Liverpool were going to start where they left off last season and go and win an our league title. It's a frustrating one with Isak for Liverpool, because he got that goal against Spurs and his season's probably over now. And it's another injury and it's a leg break. And look, it was good to hear Jamie Carragher say what he said. A Liverpool man saying that it was an accident, and it was an accident. It was a freak incident that I think if you replayed that incident 100 times over, it's very unlikely that would happen. So it's just very unfortunate. But Isak's had a lot of setbacks now with injuries in the last few seasons that I think it's looking like that 125 million's probably not going to work out. Ekitike got another goal. He looks a real top player in the making. Wirtz, he got man of the match, I think, in that game, but he didn't really do a lot. It was a poor game, so I wouldn't be getting carried away with him just yet. I think a lot of Liverpool fans have been accusing Slot. He's not getting the best out of the players. You think about Salah's dip, Van Dijk's dip, Kanate's all over the show at the back. The fullbacks they've brought on hasn't worked out. So a coach will always be questioned when the players are underperforming.
But when a manager comes in, particularly in their first season, and they win you the Premier League, does that not give you more than enough credit in the bank to have a little bit of a blip in your second season?
Well, I wasn't one of a lot of my friends are Liverpool fans, and I was saying, Slot deserves some time because of what he did last year, but also the fact that I've watched Liverpool and their issues are clearly at the back, and they do need reinforcements at the back, but they still are a team that create a lot of chances, and they're an entertaining team. That's very basketballish type games, and at least when they are maybe not picking up points, it's still an entertaining game. So I think it's very similar to how it was with Spurs last year, but with Ange. Although the results have improved in recent weeks for Liverpool, but Chris, they went through a period there. I think they lost 9 out of 12 games, and that's unheard of at Liverpool. And I think it was their worst run at home in front of fans, because the last one was during COVID under Klopp, but in front of fans, it was their worst run at home since the 1950s. So when you're breaking records like that, you're always going to be under pressure at a top club. But I do like Arne Slot. I think he's very honest as well what he says, and I think there would be a lot of teams out there that would pick up Arne Slot if Liverpool were to part ways. But it'll be interesting to see what happens between now and the end of the season, because, as it says, I don't think, unless they do some serious business in January, especially in that defence, I don't think they're good enough to finish in the top 4 or top 5. I think there's better teams around them. And if he doesn't get into the Champions League, would that be a sackable offence at Liverpool with the players that he's got at his disposal? That'll be the one day way up. But Liverpool are a very patient club, Chris. They tend to give managers time. And especially as you say, someone that's won the league in their first season should get an opportunity. I don't expect Slot to be sacked between now and the end of the season, but I've heard Liverpool fans say if he doesn't finish in the top 4 or 5 in Champions League football next season, his job would be untenable.
Okay, right. These teams in the history have played 100 times. Liverpool winning 55, Wolves winning 30, and the remaining 15 finishing as a draw. Last season, both games, home and away, finished Liverpool winning 2-1, and Liverpool have won 16 of their last 17 Premier League games against Wolves, with the exception being a 3-0 defeat at Molineux back in Feb 2023. Gareth, I'm going to go for 4-0 Liverpool.
I'm going to go for a very tight Liverpool win. I'm going to go for a 2-1-1.
A tight Liverpool win, wow. Against a winless Wolves team.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, next up is West Ham, who are down in 18th against Fulham, who just beat Nottingham Forest on Monday night. They are in 13th. Gareth, are West Ham going down?
It looks nailed on at the minute. As we says, the form's not good enough. The teams around them are winning games, with the exception of Spurs. And yeah, I don't think they've got a great squad there. It looks a very unbalanced squad. Nuno seems to be very unhappy there at the minute. And I know you said at the start, Chris, that you thought Nuno would get them out of this mess, but I think what's really surprised a lot of the league is Leeds going on this run of form. Because I think everyone was expecting Leeds would be that other team in the bottom 3, and West Ham would probably just about survive. But
we're only at Christmas. I think West Ham will get out of this.
Yeah, West Ham will get out. No, I think they're doomed unless they do some serious. But I think January is going to be key for a lot of teams, Chris. I think this is a January window that's going to be similar to one we've had, one of those windows where you see a lot of movement. Some January windows is very, very quiet, but I think because a lot of teams are in a mess, I think this is going to be a very busy January window for Premier League clubs, because those teams around the bottom end of the league will be nervous and think we need to try and get out of this. There's a massive, if you look at that race for the top 4 or 5, Chris, there's a lot of teams that will believe with a bit of consistency they can get on. So I think that may encourage teams to do a bit of business. The Premier League, as you say, the title race is very, very tight. So will Arsenal and Man City try and do some business? I think it'll be a very busy January window, and a very busy January window for you, Chris, because I know you're very you do your videos around the transfers. I think Tottenham will be another club from what we're hearing that'll be extremely busy. So it makes for an exciting month, January. To see where the movement happens, and Chris, maybe some of those players that are on the fringes of clubs, will be trying to get into their World Cup squads for the summer, so they'll be pushing for moves. Agents will be trying to come up with any little loan moves they can to try and get players out the door and try and get some money into the pocket. So very interesting to see what happens in this January window. But West Ham, this is a massive game for them. They've got to get a win here. Must win, I think. Fulham have turned the corner in recent weeks. They've picked up some results too, so they'll come into this game with confidence.
Where do you think Fulham boss Marco Silva will be next year?
Well, I definitely think he'll be gone from Fulham, because he's an hour manager like Oliver Glasner, who's been criticising the board, doesn't he? And I think when you start criticising the board, you're a dead man walking, really. Now, from what I hear, they don't want to lose him, but he's shouting his mouth off in the press about the lack of business. And as it says, I think Marco Silva and Oliver Glasner have outgrown the clubs they're at. Fulham and Crystal Palace aren't clubs that are going to be pushing for European places on regular seasons, and they're not going to be teams that are going to be competing for cups, and that's where those managers want to be at. So Marco Silva's been linked with the Tottenham job quite a lot, but for whatever reason, Spurs don't seem to be interested. The one thing that worries me about Marco Silva, Chris, is he always looks unhappy and he's always moaning, and I don't think that's good traits for a manager, especially at a top club. I think that's why teams are put off him.
That was going to be my question. So what do these clubs actually want? Because you bring in a manager who does a good job, who gets you good results with the players and the transfer windows that they have. What do the clubs actually want? Surely you'd think that they'd back and grow with the managers that exactly what they're trying to do at these football clubs and make them successful.
Yeah, I think a lot of the problems that these clubs have, Chris, is with the new financial rules. Is they're under so many restrictions. Fulham aren't a global, worldwide football club who have fans in every part of the world. So their turnover wouldn't be as big as some of the other teams that they want to aspire to be. So that's a sticking point in itself. So they can only spend really what they earn. I think you can only lose 105 million over 3 seasons, or you're in danger of being deducted points. But there has been teams that have gambled, like Nottingham Forest, who have gambled on breaking those rules to get better players in. And if you only get hit with a 3 or 4 point deduction, is it worth it? Is it worth doing? Because Nottingham Forest have brought on a lot of. If you look at Nottingham Forest squad, the Fulham squad, you would say that Nottingham Forest probably have better players, and they're in Europe as well now. Yes, Forest have a massive history, but they were in the Championship a few seasons ago, and all of a sudden now Fulham have been an established Premier League team, and they seem to be stuck in this rut, Chris, of being a mid-table team. Crystal Palace, we know Steve Parish is a very good negotiator. I think Steve Parish is possibly the closest chairman to Daniel Levy in the league. He runs a very tight ship. He's a master negotiator. And I think Oliver Glasner's probably had enough of him because, Palace aren't going to bring in any top players on big wages for him to be able to progress Palace on. So you've seen how he reacted when Eze went. You've seen how he reacted when there was news of Mark Gahey moving. And look, Mark Gahey's either moving now in January or at the end of the season. So he'll not be happy about that. And I think Oliver Glasner will definitely be in our club next season. And he'll have no shortage of offers, the job he's done there.
There will be a long queue for Oliver Glasner, I can tell you that. West Ham have lost their last couple of Premier League games, losing at home to Aston Villa, and I think it's fair to say, Gareth, that West Ham should have got something out of that game. And most recently, they lost 3-0 away at City. Fulham have won their last couple of Premier League matches, beating Burnley 3-2 away, and as I mentioned, Monday Night Football beating Forest 1-0 at home. I'm going to go, and this might surprise you, I'm going to go for a 2-1 West Ham win.
Yeah, Fulham have been poor travellers of note recently, but the last couple of games they've got results at Spurs and at Burnley, so that may give them some confidence that they can go 1 away from home. But I am going to go for a draw, Chris. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw.
Okay, right. Next up is the late kickoff on Saturday, the 27th of December. Chelsea host Aston Villa. Surely this is the match of the day, isn't it, on Saturday?
Huge game. Chris, I'm a big believer of stats, and the one reason that I think Aston Villa will probably not be in the title race in a couple of months' time is they're outperforming a lot of the stats. They're scoring a lot of goals from very little XG. Now, I know we've been critical of Thomas Frank, with shots outside the box going on against Tottenham, but I don't know if that is sustainable for teams to be scoring a lot of screamers every week and a lot of great goals. Man United had a higher XG in them last week, and I think that's been the case with Villa for a number of weeks now. They've actually been second best on the numbers, but they found a way to win. Morgan Rogers, if you looked at Morgan Rogers is having his own goal of the season competition this season. He could be, if they pull up all the best goals from the Premier League this season, Morgan Rogers probably has 2 or 3 in there at least. So the way he's playing, and we had this with Gareth Bale, Chris, if you remember that 2012-2013 season, if Gareth Bale had the ball outside the box, you felt it was going into the back of the net, and Morgan Rogers is a bit like that at the moment. They're definitely coming into this game in the better form than Chelsea. I know Chelsea beat Everton. They end that little money drought they were on, and they fought back to get a 2-2 draw at Newcastle, but I thought Newcastle were the better team, and that game should have been over in the first half. So I think Villa come in the better form, but Chelsea will definitely be up for this, and I think what you says at the top of the show, this is going to be a very entertaining game.
There's a lot of talk about Maresca. If Pep Guardiola did leave Manchester City, that Maresca could be in line for the return to the Etihad. Could you see that happening if that was the case?
Well, I think if you look at Brentford, I know they're on completely different scales, but I think bringing in a manager that's very similar or been round the club that has a very similar style of play, it's an easier transition. And if you look at Brentford under Thomas Frank and Brentford under Keith, there's really no difference. It just looks like he's continued on. And Maresca is obviously a disciple of Pep. Mikel Arteta is another one. If you remember the first time we heard about Pep leaving, Mikel Arteta was linked with that job. But I think there's been too much rivalry with Man City and Arsenal now in terms of the title races, and where Arsenal are probably at in terms of they're very close to Man City. They have been for a number of years in terms of the points that Arteta's probably not gettable for Man City now. He'll probably stay at Arsenal. But I think it would almost feel like a Sol Campbell episode if Mikel Arteta left Arsenal and went to Man City, just because they've been competing against each other for a number of years. So Chelsea haven't really been in the picture, so it wouldn't feel like he's automatically going to a rival. Chelsea have been a team that's been competing for the top 4, top 5. They haven't really been in any title races with Man City in recent seasons, so you could definitely see that happening. You could definitely see why Man City would go down that route, because Maresca, he knows Pep's style, and he plays attacking football, and he's a disciple, as I said. So yeah, I definitely think there is juice in that one. And some of the things that Maresca's been saying about Chelsea, it almost feels like he's trying to negotiate his exit at the end of the season. So all signs point to, if Pep leaves, that it could be Maresca. But I think for players joining Man City now in January, Chris, I'm nearly sure the agent and the player will be asking what's happening with Pep as he's staying at home, because Man City haven't got that draw. It's not as big as of a draw without Pep, because he is the best manager around.
What about this for an incredible stat? Aston Villa have won each of their last 10 matches in all competitions and could equal their all-time club record of 11 consecutive victories, both set in September 1897 and March 1914. It's an incredible run, Gareth, isn't it? Does Emery get the credit that he deserves from a lot of rival fans, general football fans?
Definitely not. I mean, I think Jamie Carragher said on Monday Night Football there recently, I think he's the second best manager by far in the Premier League. And, you look at his record elsewhere, what he's done at our clubs, and he's multiple Europa League winner with different teams. And we know, Chris, how difficult that Europa League is to win. Even when you see a big name drop on it, they don't always go on to win it, because it's such a competitive competition. And I think Unai Emery's won 3 or 4 Europa Leagues. That is an unbelievable record to have. And they do it with different Spanish clubs as well. I think it's brilliant. In my opinion, Chris, he never got a fair crack at the whip at Arsenal. He wasn't backed. He came in at a really difficult time when the club was in a mess. Arsene Wenger, for how good he was as a manager, he left Arsenal in a real bad state with a squad. The people that were behind in the recruitment were miles behind other clubs. And Arsenal, it was a very difficult time to be managing that club. And I think because of his personality too, he never really got that. There was a lot of mockery, and good evening was bad. Nobody's saying that now anymore, because he's got the respect he deserves at Aston Villa. So, no, for me, top manager. And a lot of teams missed a trick when he went to Aston Villa. I think that Arsenal episode was a real stain on his record, but I think he's expunged that now. And as I said, Chris, I would have loved nothing more with Tottenham completely out of this title race by far. I hope Aston Villa go on to win it. What a story it would be. And Unai Emery is just such a likeable manager as well. I love watching him on the sideline.
What did they say about him?
Good evening. They're not saying it now. They are not saying it anymore.
No, it might surprise you, Gareth, but I'm going to go for an 11th consecutive Aston Villa win. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Aston Villa victory.
I would love to see that, but I think the record ends here. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw.
You've gone for a couple of 2-2. I think that's the third 2-2 draw you've gone for.
Yeah, I think a lot of these games are going to be entertaining, and there's not much between some of the teams.
Well, is the Sunday 2 p.m. kickoff, Sunderland v Leeds, is this going to be an entertaining game, in your opinion?
I don't think so. I think this could be one of those ones where people might give it a miss, or it might make some of the people that have had a very, very entertaining Christmas. It might give them a delayed onset. Watching this game, I don't think this will be particularly entertaining. I think Leeds will be very defensive in this game. They have been like that away from home. And I think that is probably the right way to go for Leeds. I think, if they can pick up, the odd draw here and there away from home, we know Leeds is a tough game away for any club because of the atmosphere. And Leeds seem to have that real energy at home where they give anybody a game. So Leeds will be desperate to keep that good run going. They're hitting Sunderland at the right time. Any team that's hitting Sunderland in this Christmas period is hitting them at the right time, because we know there's multiple players away at AFCON. But Sunderland, they seem to be riding that wave, Chris, and they seem like it's very much us against the world. And I think that Newcastle result was massive for them. Beating their local rivals was huge. But I think this will be a hard watch.
Calvert-Lewin is going to be extremely important for Leeds, isn't he? But they've got to keep him fit.
Yeah, they've got to keep him fit, and there is question marks regarding his fitness. There has been. He's had a lot of injuries, so I'm sure Leeds will be going under the market in January to get some cover in place for him. Peru was a very good championship striker, but he's probably not good enough for the Premier League. He's not at that level, so they definitely need someone to come in there and help Calvert-Lewin. But I think if you're looking at it at the minute, Chris, between Leeds and West Ham, your money's on Leeds to stay up. I know you think West Ham will turn it around. I'm assuming you think West Ham will catch. It'll be Leeds to catch.
Yeah. I think that's
why January is so important for these clubs.
Yeah. We're going to go for, because Sunderland do have a good home record this season.
Yeah, I'm going to go for the unbeaten record to continue. I'm going to go for a 1-0 Sunderland win.
1-0. I'm going to go for a 2-0 Sunderland win. Right, on Sunday, the 28th of December, Tottenham Hotspur travelled to Selhurst Park. Now, Crystal Palace have played 17 games so far this season. They have won 7, they have drawn 5, and they have lost 5. They have 26 points. Spurs at Christmas go into this game 14th in the Premier League table. We have played 17. We have won 6, drawn 4, and lost 7. Both teams have lost their last couple of games. Crystal Palace losing against Manchester City and most recently Leeds United, and Spurs losing 3-0 away at Forest and most recently 2-1 at home against Liverpool. This is a huge game for Thomas Frank. It is a huge game for us Tottenham fans. Gareth, Crystal Palace v Spurs. Oliver Glasner has done a fantastic job at Crystal Palace in the last couple of years. Thomas Frank, it appears he is becoming, increasingly under pressure. A lot of Spurs fans are unhappy with the style of football. A lot of Spurs fans at the moment are unhappy with Thomas Frank's comments. And, of course, our results and the league position, 14th at Christmas.
Yeah, it's not been good enough, Chris. And look, I don't want to hear any excuses from the manager going into this game or after the game. We are playing a team that is now going to have their 4th game in 10 days. That is a horrible schedule that Palace have been given because, of the Europa Conference League and that League Cup quarter-final. This will be their 4th game in 10 days. And they had a couple of players go off injured against Arsenal as well this week in the League Cup. So they're down to the bare bones, really. You couldn't have wished, and we know Palace have been having a great season, but you couldn't have wished for this fixture to come at a better time for an opposition team. Palace are a tough game any week, but this is potentially the best time to catch them. I know we've got suspensions, the players, and I know we've got injuries, but Palace are in the same boat, Chris. They are stretched thin. So I don't want to hear any excuses from the manager about this game. And again, Chris, we've pointed out so many times over recent weeks, this manager keeps bigging up the opposition, keeps referring to them as a top set. This can't continue. This negative mindset that's being created going into games. Palace are a good outfit. We know they're a good outfit, but this isn't Pep's Barcelona. This isn't the PSG team that won the Champions League last season. A good Tottenham team will be going into this game going, this is our 4th game in 10 days here. They're going to be on fumes. We should be going out here and getting a result. But as with how the team is at the minute and the manager, I don't think Spurs fans have any confidence, despite what we says about Crystal Palace's schedule, that they can get a result in this game. And how can that be at this great football club? But that's the mindset going into the game.
Gareth, let's start by talking about Crystal Palace first of all. Of course, they are the host club on Sunday at Selhurst Park. They've lost their last couple of games against City and against Leeds United. What do you make of their performances, particularly in that Leeds game? And it's fair to say as well that only a couple of weeks ago, I think on Matchweek 13, they lost at home against Manchester United. What sort of game are you expecting? How do you think Oliver Glasner will set up against Tottenham? And of course, I suppose we ought to talk about the League Cup game as well against Arsenal recently.
Yeah, I think there's no disgrace with this at all with Crystal Palace. I just think the squad has been really tested now. They've had that extra game in the Europa Conference League where they get the league phase wrapped up before Christmas, the 6 games, whereas the other Champions League teams had a break that final week that Crystal Palace played. And I always say it's a sign of a team that's going really well when you have too many games, but it can also create problems with injuries and fatigue, and that Arsenal schedule didn't help them with the game. I think they played Thursday, Sunday, Tuesday there, and they had a big game in the Europa Conference League against a team, let's be honest, they should have beaten. The fact that they couldn't win that game would be a worry. They drew the game 2-2, and that's 2 extra games for Crystal Palace now in January that they didn't need. The game against, I think they had a 48-hour turnaround, from playing at home to going away to Leeds. So there would have been just recovery, no training time. Probably didn't have much time to prepare for Leeds at all. And there's no doubt Jamie Carragher highlighted this on his analysis show that it looked a team, and Oliver Glasner is very much an organised manager, but it looked a team that didn't even have a chance to do any analysis for Leeds because Leeds hammered them with long throws and Palace didn't know what to do. And Leeds ran out comfortable winners 4-1. I think what we've seen from Palace in the League Cup was much better. It looked more like an Oliver Glasner team. It looked like the Crystal Palace team we're used to. They were organised, they were structured. And let's be honest, they were unlucky with that goal they conceded with the own goal. And they took Arsenal the penalties at the Emirates was an impressive result. So the one positive for us, Chris, is as it says, the 4 games in 10 days. What kind of shape are they going to be in? It's going to be, again, very much about recovery. They did have a couple of injuries in the game, so it probably won't be a full-strength Crystal Palace team. But like I says, other than Wolves, Chris, they're probably thinking the same about us. Great, after this tough period, they couldn't have wished for a better opponent, a struggling Spurs team. And I just cannot accept that being the mentality of this club and the mentality of this manager and team that, we should be going into this game as favourites because of Palace's schedule. But really, Palace are the favourites, despite that schedule.
Gareth, what have you made of the job that Oliver Glasner has done since going in there at Selhurst Park? Because, of course, delivered them the FA Cup, Charity Shield. The fans, are living a good moment under him at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to Eddie Howe. Victim of his own success in terms of Palace were a team that were kind of just mid-table-ish, and now they've got their hands on that FA Cup. Now they've got into Europe. Oliver Glasner's like, right, let's push on, let's kick on, let's push up this league, and let's create something special. But I think there's been a conversation behind the scenes. They've sold Eze, their best player. Gahey, their best player and captain, will be leaving between now and the summer. And he's going, well, what's going on here? This is we're supposed to use this as a springboard. They push on and be a regular European club. But that is just not where Palace are. And he's got frustrated around that. So he's done an unbelievable job, but this is probably the ceiling for Crystal Palace. This is probably as good as it gets under Oliver Glasner. I don't think he'll be there next season. And look, only time will tell if Crystal Palace regret this, because I think whoever they get, Chris, it's unlikely to be at the level of an Oliver Glasner, whoever the replacement is. And I've already seen they've been doing groundwork on who they're going to bring in. So I think when they started that already, it's pretty evident that he won't be there next season. So disappointing for Palace, but Oliver Glasner probably is on a different trajectory to Crystal Palace, and that is just it's dog eat dog. It's there's big fish and there's small fish, and Oliver Glasner's a bigger fish than Crystal Palace at the moment.
Gareth, who are the key players for Crystal Palace in this game, would you say?
Well, I think Mark Gahey's a brilliant defender and leader and captain. I think. And we know Romero's can have great games and he can be very aggressive. And you think about that Europa League final, how strong he was in that game. But he has moments of madness, and we've seen that come out again against Liverpool. Mark Gahey has a completely different, he's a completely different personality, and he's a top leader and captain. That's the way I want my captain to perform. Somebody that's reliable. You don't want a liability as a captain. And if players see if players see that Romero's the captain and doing them type of things, how can they be expected to be disciplined on the pitch? And that's what we're seeing creeping in with Spurs. Whereas Mark Gahey's an excellent leader and captain. He conducted himself, Chris, in the summer, I have to say, with complete and utter respect. And even after he didn't get his move, he didn't come out and make a big song and dance about it. Yes, he was disappointed, and that was reported, but he got his head down and he's had a terrific season. And look, I think the terrific professional that he is, he'll probably stay there until the summer and see out the season with Crystal Palace. I don't think, from Crystal Palace's point of view, would 15 or 20 million be too much for them in January? Probably not. I think Oliver Glasner will definitely be targeting that Conference League and trying to go out on a high with Crystal Palace and deliver a European trophy. Which, let's be honest, Chris, they should be one of the favourites in that competition based on what we've seen from them in the league and the FA Cup last season. So I would love to see Crystal Palace going and win the FA Cup, and love to see the Europa Conference League, and love to see Oliver Glasner go out on a high. Gahey's going to be a big player for them. Mateta, we know, is a huge threat. He is a bully. He scored against us last season in that 1-0 defeat we had up there. I I think Adam Morton's a terrific player, Chris, an absolutely terrific. If I could go out and sign one midfielder that I think Tottenham could get, he would be the one. I think he's such a great technique about him. Reminds me very much of Michael Carrick in that way. A very similar type of player, only being left-footed. I think he should definitely be in that England squad for the World Cup in the summer. And I think in the summer there'll be a lot of teams looking at him because there isn't an abundance of defensive midfielders around there. And what we've seen, Chris, with Palhinha is he's a defensive midfielder. He maybe hasn't got in the technical ability. Adam Morton's got everything. He can play that role and he can distribute the pattern. What I see a lot of him, Chris, and I've seen even against Arsenal in the League Cup, he always tries to play forward. Always tries to, and I think that's the sign of a very brave player. It's not afraid to make a mistake. And I love when a player like that progresses the ball forward. And if you look at him, he's always scanning. He's a very, very, very top. He's going to be a top player for whoever he goes to after Crystal Palace. And I think in the future for England, I think he's going to be a nailed on starter. I would imagine it'll be Wharton and Rice in years to come in that midfield. Anderson's on there at the moment, isn't he? But I think Adam Wharton will eventually find his way into that team as a starter. But look, those are going to be the three key players that Spurs are going to have to try and stop. And our word for Munoz, I think Munoz has been a terrific player for them in that right wing back role. But I think he could possibly be injured. I'm not sure on that, Chris. I think he might be carrying an injury. So that would be a boost for Spurs if he wasn't playing. But you know what you're going to get from Crystal Palace. I think that Leeds game was just the recovery time and the turnaround time. They went into that game unprepared. They'll have had a couple of days. They rest between now and Spurs. And it's very rare you see an Oliver Glasner Crystal Palace team rolled over. So I think it's going to be a very difficult game. Despite Crystal Palace carrying fatigue, I still think it'll be a tough game.
I was going to say that, Gareth, and I think it's very, very fair to say because Matchweek 16 and 17 of this Premier League campaign, they've conceded 7 goals in the 2 games that they have played and lost, Manchester City and Leeds. This is not normal under Oliver Glasner, is it? Because they've had games coming thick and fast. Their schedule has been absolutely crazy and very, very hectic.
What sort of game? The Man City game, sorry, even though it was 3-0, it was not a 3-0 game. If you look at the stats in that game, it definitely wasn't. The Leeds game was the one that was disappointing.
What sort of game are you expecting? Because it's fair to say, isn't it, that an Oliver Glasner team is very hard to break down.
Yeah, I think it'll be a very tight scoreline at the end. I think Crystal Palace will be the team that are probably asking more questions. They're a threat from set pieces, as we've seen against Arsenal. Mark Gahey's a real threat. I don't think it'll be a particularly great watch, to be honest, Chris. But I think Palace will find a way to undo us. And that's what I'm leaning towards. But I don't expect it to be a basketball type game. I think Palace will probably know in terms of, I think if it turned into a basketball game, it would probably suit Spurs because Spurs should be the fresher team. I think Palace they might be a little bit more pragmatic than they normally would be at home just because they won't want the game being stretched because of the fatigue issues that we spoke about. So I think they'll try and play the game on their terms. I don't expect Spurs to open the game up. They haven't been doing that away from home, let's be honest. So I think it could be quite a poor watch. I don't think it's a great Super Sunday for Sky.
Now, of course, Javi Simmons is suspended. He's suspended for 3 games, having been sent off against Liverpool last weekend. Christian Romero, captain, of course, will miss this game because of his second yellow card against Liverpool, having been sent off. Kevin Danso is expected to come into the team to deputise for Romero. Now, you spoke about the set pieces and the throw-ins in particular, in the Leeds game. Is this an area where we can expose Crystal Palace and dare I say it, actually score from one of these long throws? And interestingly, Kevin Danso in the last couple of days in an interview stated that when Thomas Frank got all of the players to do the throws, it was him, Lucas Bergvall, and Ben Davis was among those the best at the long throws.
Yeah, I think it is a game for Danzo. Just because we says about the long throws, we Leeds, that was an area that Palace looked vulnerable. They conceded from another set piece, if you remember, Chris, against Arsenal in the League Cup. That was a set piece goal. So they are quite good from their own set pieces as well, but they haven't been that good at defending them. Interestingly, I think Spurs are the team that's conceded the least. I think only 2 goals from set pieces this season. So maybe Spurs may be able to cope with Crystal Palace from those set pieces. But Chris, I find it very difficult to be excited about, can we win the game and exposing that team from set pieces? We should be aiming higher than that. Yes, it's a nice tool to have, but as you pointed out, these long throws haven't necessarily been working. It's been more from corners where we've been more dangerous. But as it says, I think it could be a very scrappy game, Chris. And but I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that we'll get a result despite all the negativity around the schedule that Crystal Palace have had.
Now, in Premier League history, Crystal Palace and Spurs have met 32 times. Spurs do have a good record against Palace, winning 19. We've won 10 at home and 9 away. Crystal Palace have won 6. They've won 4 at home, 2 away, and 7 of those 32 games have finished as a draw. Now, last season, Crystal Palace did the league double over Tottenham, beating us 1-0 in October 24 and beating us 2-0 in May 2025. Now, Gareth, compared to this stage last season under Ange Postecoglou, and it is very fair to say that we've had a lot of injuries this season, but it's also very fair to say that we had a lot of injuries under Ange Postecoglou last season. We had more points at this stage last season. We were in a better league position at this stage last season. And also, Ange's team, Ange's Tottenham, had scored more goals. We conceded less. We'd had more shots on target, more touches inside the opposition box. Less errors were made. We had played more progressive passes and more through balls. Does any of these stats that I've just read out surprise you?
Not at all, Chris. And I think that is the worry that the manager will have. He will come out in the press and he'll say this is a long-term project and, it's not a quick fix. And, he's mentioned the injuries and he's mentioned about refereeing decisions, but the stats are really alarming, Chris. I mean, it almost... I absolutely once when I say this, but it almost looks like we're out of our depth in this league. Every stat there, we're in the bottom 3 or 4 around the, we're competing with the worst teams in the league. We don't necessarily look in most games that we can score a goal. We got that goal back against Liverpool, and there was a bit of a, Liverpool got nervous, and I think the crowd got behind the team, and I think that was a bit of an anomaly those last 15 minutes. But we never really looked like scoring before that, especially in that first half. The first halves are a major issue, especially at home, Chris. We never looked like scoring. The United game was poor. The Chelsea game was poor. The Fulham game was a complete disaster. And away from home, the form in recent weeks has completely fell off. And we've been well beaten in a lot of them games. Well beaten at Arsenal. Well beaten in Paris. Well beaten at Nottingham Forest. And the manager's not stupid because he will know that despite what he's been told about this being a long-term project, that these numbers are unsustainable. It is unsustainable for a team like Tottenham to be, this is what's been put on display every week because we know there's players on that squad. Yes, we know we need reinforcements, but we know there's better quality of player on that squad than what's being produced on the pitch. I've pointed out many times about Bentancur, the amount of negative passes under this manager compared to previous managers. The drop off is insane. So that tells me that he's been told to do that. You don't just naturally start doing that. The confidence is being sucked out of these players. The one thing, Chris, that's really starting to show is the frustration in the camp with the players. We've now started getting red cards. The players are turning their back on the manager when he goes to shake hands. The players are having a pop at the fans. The fans are getting angry with the players. The manager's been talking about the fans. There's so much negativity around what's going on at the moment. That's why I think it's completely untenable and unsustainable on what we're seeing. I think if the performances were better and the results maybe weren't there would be a bit more patience. But the fans are fed up watching this every week. And you look at, we spoke about Forest, Chris. You look at the teams that are beating Spurs and then you go and watch them the next week and they're getting beat by another average team. Every team seems to be able to get the upper hand on Tottenham at the moment. As it 1-1 in 9 league games. I mean, and the numbers are just as bad. Like what we says about Ange, Chris, there was more injuries than there was last season than there was this season. He's had a fully fit back 4 and goalkeeper, which Ange didn't have. He's had Kudos come in, Xavi Simons come in. Those players weren't available last year. Colo Muani, all these players were supposed to come in and help, but from what I'm seeing, there's no improvement, and we're getting worse week by week. So I would love to be more positive, Chris, but all signs point to being a miserable Christmas.
That term, Gareth, a must-win. I remember Ange Postecoglou saying on a couple of occasions in the press conferences that every game is a must-win game. You just mentioned there it's actually one win in the last 8 Premier League games, and you mentioned that the away form and the home form. At home in the calendar year of 2025, we picked up 15 points out of a possible 54. We're breaking, or we have broken, a number of records, club records, I might add, and XG has been extremely bad this season as well. But when you say about the home form, the away form at the start of the season was pretty good. But you mentioned there the last away game, Nottingham Forest away, losing 3-0. In actual fact, it probably should have been more, and we were well beaten. Regarding Thomas Frank, when a manager only wins 1 in 8, yes, this is a transition period for the football club. But when we won the Europa League in May, I think a lot of fans, including myself, felt that this was going to be a bit of a springboard for us to have more success at the football club. And I know there's going to be a big there's going to be a big look, isn't there, at the board in what they can deliver in the January transfer window, and particularly the summer transfer window under this new structure with the Lewis family. But I just think it's a bit of a mixture, Gareth, where some players aren't good enough, some players are underperforming, some players are perhaps doing things that Thomas Frank wants them to do. So, he's a little bit different from last season if they were here. You've got the likes of Javi Simmons, who have had a real mixture of performances. Not many minutes as probably he would have liked under Thomas Frank in his first seasonal start at Tottenham. Then you've got the manager. I believe that he needs to deliver a lot more as well. And then, of course, you've got the board who need to deliver better players for the managers. Because, how many times have I said this? Since us moving in the stadium in 2019, including Pochettino to now Thomas Frank, we've had 6 permanent managers. We've had 3 interim appointments, which was Ryan Mason twice and Stellini when Conte went. How many times can we keep swapping and changing managers? Because the other thing is that I wanted to mention is that the positives from that Liverpool game. I've always said that as Spurs fans, we've got to see positive signs game by game by game under a manager. In that last 10 minutes or so, Spurs could have very easily got something out of that game. And fair play to Arne Slot in the press conference after the Liverpool defeat. He said that it was like Liverpool having 11 men, it was like Liverpool having 9 men and Spurs having 11. We suddenly come alive, didn't we? We were a lot better team with 9 men than 11.
Yeah, Chris, I'll answer all those points that you made, because there were some fantastic points in there. But just the Liverpool game, I think the goal, Spurs scoring the goal, the game went rogue. Liverpool got very nervous and they looked very unsettled, and it's almost as if players just off the cuff started doing things that we expect them to do, playing forward, getting the ball into the box, putting them on the rail. Richarlison was causing chaos. I'm not his biggest fan, but he caused a lot of trouble. I think Odegaard was very direct. If you think back to that first half, Kudus kept turning backwards with the ball and slowing it down, whereas Odegaard was running at people and causing problems. And it's almost as if they were doing things that off their own back, kind of off the cuff. And I think that completely took Liverpool by surprise. So I wouldn't be reading too much into that, Chris. I would love to be positive about it, but I think that was very much a mixture of Liverpool kind of getting very nervous and Spurs kind of just going rogue and just going against the grain and doing things off the cuff. I don't expect them to start. I don't expect Spurs when the first whistle goes tomorrow. I don't expect Spurs to be piling players forward and putting Palace under pressure. I think the tactics, as we've seen in that first half, Chris, was very much to slow the game down, get men behind the ball, and make it difficult for Liverpool to play through. And I keep saying this every week. It seems like we're preparing for the opposition, and we're forgetting to prepare about our own performance of what we're going to do to hurt the opposition.
Yeah.
On the manager, Chris, it's okay to say this is a transitional period and this is going to be, a long-term project, but we have to see signs of the project going in the right direction, and we're seeing absolutely none at the moment. It looks to me like we're going backwards from the eye test. The stats back up everything that you're watching. I can't find one positive stat out there other than being the best team from defending set pieces and being one of the best at scoring from set pieces. That was the only positive stat. And that can't be. It can't just be accepted that that's good enough. The manager keeps blaming, the referees, the opposition being very good, or injuries and suspensions, and he's having a pop at the fans about, as you said, Chris, there was fans last week. Am I one of those fans, or am I another fan? Am I the fans that I'm being too negative, or am I a Thomas Frank and Tottenham? I'm behind the team. Every fan is behind the club. Every fan wants the team to win games, but the players and the manager are not doing enough on the pitch to convince the fans. Chris, when you turn up to every game, you want to be turning up there thinking we can win. And that hasn't been the case in recent weeks. There's a lot of negativity before the game even starts, and we're not seeing anything in the game that tells you that this is going to turn around. So, in my opinion, it's a short-term project now. He needs to start winning games, because the club has got the club must be scratching their head at the moment, because we know this form can't continue. We can't be going into this January period with another couple of defeats, Chris, because there is a January transfer window. How can you back a manager that's got 1-1-10? I mean, at a club like Tottenham, it's very difficult for the club at the minute. I'm sure they're having conversations about what do we do now if Thomas Frank and the team don't improve in the next couple of weeks, because they will have planned for January. But how can you back a manager that can't win a game of football, or can at least show some signs that a few ones aren't far away? At the minute, I have no confidence of going into any of these games that we can win them. And we're playing teams like Crystal Palace, Brentford, Sunderland, Bournemouth. We're not playing Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool, Man United, and Arsenal. These are teams that a lot of our teams can beat. We've praised some of those teams, yes, for having decent seasons, but they're not going to be teams that are going to be in the top 4 at the end of the season. So there should be no reason why we don't see some signs in these games that we can pick up some points. And Chris, look, I'm one of those fans that, if we aren't winning, I accept that if I see some level of performance or signs that this team can win maybe in a couple of weeks' time, or in a few months' time, we're going to find some consistency. The only thing that's consistent at the minute is all those negative stats. We struggle to get shots on goal. We never really looked like scoring. And defensively now, we look very vulnerable in recent weeks. So even at the start of the season, when that was going well, we looked a bit more structured and a bit better organised. We have 3 at Forest, 2 at Liverpool, 4 at Arsenal, 5 in Paris. All that's completely unravelled. And like you pointed out, we didn't have a great league season last year, and the stats in every department are worse, other than set pieces.
Yeah, and Thomas Frank has said a couple of times, you've got to remember where we finished last season. We finished 17th. I know you won't like that.
He's making too many excuses, Chris. Far too many excuses.
Gareth, let me read you these stats out. This might surprise you, because that Liverpool game, and I just want to get your opinion very quickly on what you made of our performance up to the 81st minute in that Liverpool match last weekend, because after 81 minutes, Spurs had 8 shots, Liverpool had 0. After 81 minutes also, Spurs had 11 touches in the opposition box. Liverpool had 0. And Tottenham had 47 touches in the final third. Liverpool had 0. After 81 minutes, it was a completely different Spurs side. But as you've mentioned about, a manager needs to find a way to win, because it isn't only Spurs. We can't just sit here and say, oh, we've got loads of injuries, we've got loads of issues, oh, this is why we're not winning matches. As a Premier League manager at any Premier League club, they have to deliver. And I completely agree with you. 1 win in 8 at the moment. If we don't win against Crystal Palace and or Brentford on New Year's Day, that could be 1 win in 10, which would be absolutely terrible. But a lot of people, and it is fair to say, we do, try and add all of the balance on these shows that we do. Solanke, Maddison, Kulusevski are not in this team. Is it going to make a real big difference when these guys do come back? Because you would hope that injection of that quality coming into this team, you would hope that it would make a real difference. And also, let's get your opinion on the January window. Do you expect players, in the positions in that final third, do you expect those to come in the January window?
Chris, there's been a lot of talk about injuries, and I don't like it when managers keep making excuses. I really don't like it, because injuries are part and parcel of football. Look, and I know Arsenal have a stronger squad, but Arsenal have been crippled with injuries this season as well, and they're top of the table. So, you can make excuses till the cows come home, but what we're seeing from the players available has not been good enough. I would be shocked if Maddison, Kulusevski, and Solanke come back and there wasn't a little bit of improvement. But from what I'm seeing with the style of play, and Chris, you pointed out there about where we mentioned about Bentancur. If Bentancur wasn't doing what the manager wanted him to do, why is he starting so many games? He keeps getting picked. So the manager seems to be happy with what he's doing, and that's playing very safe passes, negative passes, and trying to avoid risky ones. So, I mean, is he going to be saying that to some of the other players when they come back from injury? The other thing we should point out, how do you get Kulusevski, Madison, and Xavi Simons onto the same team? That doesn't work. So there's likely going to be players coming out of the team. I think it'll probably be Madison or Simons, one of the other playing. And we know Madison, yes, he's had some great games in a Tottenham shirt, but there has been inconsistencies there. He's also got he's very much, if Thomas Frank's form doesn't improve, he's not going to see James Madison because he's unlikely to play again this season. Or if he does play, it'll be at the back end of the season. Kulusevski and Solanke, I don't know what's going on there. The manager seems to be very reluctant to give us any kind of information about it.
Very.
So that is very, very strange that there's no timeline there. And with Kulusevski, there was a lot of talk at the start of the season. Where was he going to play because of Kudos's form? But Kudos has dropped off a cliff at the moment. I think Kudos needs to come out of the team, personally. I think we need to make some changes for the Crystal Palace game just to see if it makes any kind of difference. Because that performance from Mohamed Kudus on Saturday was unacceptable. For the player that he's been at the start of his Tottenham career, he's now that game, he didn't want to take anyone on. He didn't want to play forward. He's completely lost his confidence. And yes, the manager has to take some responsibility for that, but I expected more from him on Saturday against a fullback like Milos Kerkez, who's been really, really struggling defensively. We never asked him any questions. And I think Brennan Johnson's come in for criticism. I think when Johnson came on, at least he tried to make an impact. I didn't see any real effort from Kudos in that game on Saturday, and that was a big, big worry. And Chris, if you remember what the West Ham fans said about him, they says he had a great start, and then he started doing this where he didn't look interested, and he didn't look interested on Saturday, and I think that's a massive worry. But we'll come on to the team selection. In terms
Gareth, before we do come on to the team selection, I just want to ask you about. We'll come on to that in a second, but about Spurs being angry. Thomas Frank was asked a question in the pre-match presser ahead of this Crystal Palace game, and said, "Were the team, an angry team against Liverpool?" I felt that there was a lot of frustration in that game because I don't often talk about refereeing performances, but John Brooks' performance in that Liverpool game was shocking, in my opinion. There were so many. I'm not just talking about the red cards or the push, Ekitike on Romero. I'm talking about a lot of decisions throughout the whole of the game. And even Thomas Frank, a couple of times, actually sarcastically applauded, when we did actually get one or two decisions, but it weren't many. We always want to see that aggressive side to our club. We always want to see that aggression from our players. Ever going back to what Jose Mourinho said in the Amazon documentary about Spurs being so soft. But I suppose it has to be controlled. Romero's red card, particularly in that very dominant spell of the game for Spurs at the end. 2 yards away, the referee stood there and he's lashed out at Konate. It just seemed stupidity from our leader and our captain at that point.
Yeah, and what he did, Chris, was cowardly. Kicking out of the player on the ground. You're always going to get sent off for that. I mean, only it was on a yellow card. They made a review that and sent him off for a straight red because it was completely unnecessary what he did. Yes, there was frustration around the decision, but you have to move on, Chris. There was time for Spurs to get back into that game, and we said it on the preview last week that Liverpool get very nervous. We've seen it at Leeds when they concede a goal, and it happened again versus 9 men when they were all over the show at the back. And you even seen someone like Van Dijk, Chris, completely missing the ball. They really struggle with getting ball, and Spurs in that first half didn't do anything to put them under any pressure. So I felt that was a real missed opportunity. And it was another strike against the manager's name because I felt there was a real opportunity. I says the only way we're going to beat Liverpool is if we play on the front foot and cause them problems, and we didn't do that until 81 minutes into the game, which is too late. And the manager keeps referring to it was a good end of the game, and he referred to a 10 or 15 minute spell against Fulham. He can't keep saying that we've good 10 minutes here and a good 10 minutes there. The game's 90 minutes long, or even longer if we count additional time. So we can't keep hanging our hats on a good 10 minutes here and there. So, yes, you can see the anger and the frustration coming out in the players because I really think they're playing under a lot of restraint. I don't think they're particularly enjoying this style of play, Chris. I think there is a lot of frustration, but they do have to channel that when they're on the pitch, because the 2 red cards, Chris, were completely, avoidable. The Van de Ven one, I think it was great. They was trying to get back, and he was breaking his neck. They try and get back and stop Isak, and it was very unfortunate what happened to Alexander Isak. But that's the kind of aggression you want to see. Van de Ven trying to stop a goal, not kicking out on the ground and not raking the back of another player's calf, because now with VAR they're always going to review those incidents, and you have a big chance of going off. And look, we're stretched as it is, Chris, with creativity problems. And now Xavi Simons is unavailable for 3 games, is it? So that's a worry moving into this busy Christmas period. And I'm seeing far too many problems on the pitch in terms of the players, how they're interacting with the fans and how they're interacting with the manager. That it's not a happy camp there at the minute, Chris. And I think that's a real concern for the manager, that he doesn't look to have control of that dressing room. Whatever you said about Ange and whatever your opinion was about Ange, I really do think the players liked him and they liked his style of play. Yes, they were there was massive holes in his style of play, and we were conceding too many goals. And the set pieces was a huge issue. But I think the way the players spoke about him and interacted with him, I think there was a real feeling that they liked him as a person and a manager. So I'm not seeing that with Thomas Frank. I'm not seeing that love for the manager. The fans definitely aren't fans of it. The fans aren't singing Thomas Frank's name. There's very little interaction with the manager, and I feel very little. And it's sad to say this, because these players give us so many good memories in Bilbao, but I'm not feeling connected with this football club, with this manager, or this team at the moment, and that is very, very sad.
Let me ask you this. In the last couple of days, Kevin Danso did an interview while he was doing some charity work with the Enfield Food Bank. And he was asked a question about what it's been like under Thomas Frank. And he come out and said, we're on the right track. We know there's going to be ups and downs. Recently, at a visit to a children's hospital, Romero and Bentancur were there. And both of them were talking about winning trophies at Spurs this season. Thomas Frank has said on a couple of occasions that this is not a quick fix. It does seem to be a lot of mixed messages about how people feel and about what we're going to do this season. Do you think the players really do feel like we're on the right track?
Chris, ask them when the cameras are off, and they'll give you the honest answer, because they're never going to say in an interview, we don't like the manager, or it's a mess right now. They're always going to say, these players are coached by the PR team, and they say what, so I says, how do you know a football player's lying? His lips move, because what they're saying is somebody else's words. It's the same as them press conferences. Thomas Frank will have an idea what's coming up because of who's in charge of the media team. They'll have prepared him the questions. And I think the question that we spoke about last week, Chris, on the preview of Liverpool, we says it was a great question, caught Thomas Frank off guard. So he asked for the question to be repeated, so he could probably give himself more time to provide an answer. So I always like it when reporters ask the difficult ones, because there's a lot of reporters out there, and this isn't a criticism, because they want to try and rank up and they want to get good connections and good relationships, but they tend to ask the nice questions. They stay on the right side of the club and the manager, so they get invited back and they get these exclusive interviews. But I really like the ones that go overboard and maybe go a bit rogue and ask the difficult ones, and that can sort of ruffle a few fellers, because you tend to get more of an honest answer. So, Madison was speaking about Thomas Frank there on Monday Night Football when he was on as well, and he was saying positive things. So they're always going to say what the coach stand is saying. So I don't take anything out of those. I look at the players' interactions with the players on the pitch when they're focused on the game and not the cameras. When we lose a game, how do they interact with the manager? We've seen so many negative incidents with various different players. So no, it doesn't look to me like a very happy camp, and I don't think the players are believing what they're saying in those interviews. I think they know we're on a right mess at the moment, and that the January window now has got to be really important, because Chris, this can't continue. And before everyone goes, oh, it can, I'm telling you now that this cannot continue at this football club, because this club is too big to be in this mess for season after season after season. We can't be in this position next year, Chris, where we're sitting in the bottom half of the table at Christmas again. And the league season, if the next few games don't go well, Chris, the league season's over, because we're not going to be able to qualify for Europe. And if we move away from the bottom three, we're just playing out our games. There's absolutely nothing to play for. And like you pointed out, Chris, and this will be hurting the Lewis family and the club. There's a real struggle at the minute to fill seats in that stadium, and that is not a good look for a big club. And the amount, as you pointed out on various different podcasts, the amount of booing at the games is crazy.
Gareth, this can't continue like this, though, can it?
I don't. It definitely can't. It definitely can't.
You've got the accent for the answer, you see.
From what we're seeing, it can. It can.
Colorado Rapids have just appointed Matt Wells, who, of course, has just left the Tottenham Hotspur coaching staff. And it's been widely reported that in the next couple of days, Fabio Paratici could be leaving, just days before the January transfer window opens. And Vino Venkatesham, Johan Langer and Fabio Paratici all sat down a couple of months ago with this new structure in place, 2 sporting directors at the football club. Gareth, what do you make of this situation? If Fabio ends up leaving in the next couple of days before the January transfer window happens, would you understand it? Do you get this situation? And with Matt Wells leaving as well, this is yet another change at the football club. How often, in the last year or so, how many changes have we seen at board level? The coaching staff, the players. We've had so many changes at the football club. This can't be. I don't see either of these two things as a positive. Do you?
No, and Chris, it looks pretty much to me like they're jumping ship. You can say that that's a good opportunity for Matt Wells to go and manage the club, but I mean, if he had stuck around at Spurs for a bit longer, we've seen what happened with Ryan Mason. He got a job in England. He was patient, and he's at West Brom, who are a big club. And yes, he got a lot of experience working with different types of managers. You think about that. That was always going to be a positive for Ryan Mason. The fact that he can say he's worked with Mourinho, with Poch kind of took him under his wing, didn't he, as well, when he was a player. So he's had influence with Pochettino, he's had influence with Mourinho, Conte, and Ange Postecoglou, and now Thomas Frank, before Thomas Frank came in. So he's worked with some big names, and that was always going to be an attractive thing for Ryan Mason. So I think Matt Wells, if he was happy, would have stayed. So I think that's worrying that he's moving on. The Paratici one is very strange because I think we're now getting to the point, Chris, where we need to hear from Vinay again, because all this stuff we were sold in the summer, it looks a million miles off now. Daniel Levy as well moving on. Whilst a lot of people were happy, that was yet another change as well. So there seems to be a lot of chopping and changing. I was never a fan of this Paratici and Lange. I don't think you can have 2 sporting directors, Chris. I just don't think that makes any sense. There's always going to be clashes, and it looks very much to me now that maybe Paratici feels he's no future here, and that's why he's potentially moving on, because why would he be leaving? After just sitting down, as you said a few months ago, and right before the January transfer window. What does that mean for, has he been overruled? Has he not already bring in the players that he wants to bring in? As Johan Langer getting the bet, is he the one that's picking the players? Because I don't think a lot of Tottenham fans have been particularly impressed with him. I says, Chris, the worry for me was the last 2 managers that have been appointed. The Australian connection, Scott Munn, Ange Postecoglou, and the Danish connection, Johan Langer and Thomas Frank. I would love to see this rigorous recruitment program for the manager that was spoken about in the summer. I would love to see how that. I would love to get an insight into how that went, because it looked very much from day one that it was going to be Thomas Frank. Yes, there was a couple of other names that got semi-linked, but it was very evident that Thomas Frank was the favourite, and that's who got the job. So I'm not a big fan of all this friends behind the scenes and bringing in your friends. I think it should have been the right man for the club, and from what we've seen so far, there's no real similarities between Thomas Frank's style of play and the identity of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. It feels very much like the wrong appointment from day one, and a lot of fans pointed that out, Chris. Yes, we wanted to give the manager a chance, but it looks like those fans that pointed that out were on the right lines. So much chopping and changing at any club, Chris, is never a positive. Never. It looks very unsettled behind the scenes, and I would love to hear from Vinay now about the January window and what's going to happen and what the plans are for the next few seasons. And if Thomas Frank does lose the next couple of games, I think they're going to have to publicly back him if they're going to back him in January with funds. I think they're going to have to make a public backing that we're going to try and see this out and give him as much time as possible to turn this around. But the fans won't accept it much longer, Chris. So it feels like we're in a real mess at the moment.
Gareth, before we talk about team selection and your predicted lineup and your score prediction, on the January transfer window, of course, in the summer window, we saw that we didn't get the deals done for targets Morgan Gibbs-White, Eberechi Eze, and even ahead of the January window, we know that Antoine Semenyo has politely said, thanks but no thanks. What do Spurs need to do as an absolute minimum to back the manager and drive this football club forward and almost insert instant, an instant player or an instant players to walk into this team and refresh this squad?
Yeah. It's easier said than done, because these players are going to look at Tottenham's position at the moment and go, well, I don't want to go and join that team because they're down the bottom end of the Premier League. I don't think there's a real belief or confidence anywhere that we're going to do anything in the Champions League. We might get one more round, we might win the playoff, or I don't think we're going to make it deep into that competition. So it really is all about the FA Cup, and let's be honest, the way Aston Villa are playing at the moment, it could be a very early exit to the FA Cup. So, the worry is, come January the 10th, Chris, we may have very little to play for, and how do we attract players? The only thing we can do is maybe throw money at them and convince them it's going to be a long-term project. But I'm sure they're going to ask, is Thomas Frank going to be the manager next season? The club probably can't answer that at the moment, because whilst they want to give Thomas Frank time, these results and performances are unsustainable. This can't go on. Like we said, we can't be sitting here in February with an hour load of defeats and the stats getting worse and worse. I just don't think, as much as the club will want to give them time, I don't think they can accept that. So there's a lot of uncertainty around Tottenham at the moment, like we've pointed out here in the last few minutes. So it's going to be very difficult to attract players. But I did listen to Alan Pardew on Talk Sport, former Crystal Palace and Newcastle manager, West Ham manager. I'm sure you all know him. But he says that they have done a lot of work behind the scenes. They fixed a lot of mistakes that were happening in the past. And apparently a lot of the mistakes were Spurs were unwilling to pay like agent fees and stuff. And that's why a lot of deals were breaking down towards the end. We also knew that there was a reluctance to give high wages out. That seems to have been something they're working on. So I think the money's there. I think there is a will to do business, but I think attracting these top players is going to be a big ask at the minute. So in my opinion, we need a left-footed left back, because Ben Davies, we know, is past it, and he can't be here much longer now at this stage. We've got to move him on. Yes, he's been a great servant, but it's time to move on from Ben Davies. We need Udogie's always injured. Jed Spence, for me, needs to go on the other side of the pitch and push Pedro Porro for his position. I think Jed Spence was one of our better players against Liverpool, but I think he would suit playing on that, because there is a reluctance for him to use his left foot. He doesn't feel confident enough. I would like to see him, rotated around with Pedro Porro on that right side, get a left back on there, because, as we said, Udogie's constantly injured. We need somebody that not a backup left back. We need a first team left back that can compete with Udogie when he's fit. We need a top centre midfielder. I've mentioned Adam Morton. I don't think that's going to be doable, but I think we should be throwing the book at Crystal Palace for Adam Morton. I think he's a real top player, and somebody can go into that midfield and will progress the ball. Well, if the manager lets him to be, that's the only thing. But that's a story for another day. I think an Adam Morton type player in that midfield, we need it. We're crying out for a top striker, and we're crying out as well for a top left-sided player, because how many players have been on that left side? Matisse Tell's been over there. Richarlison and Muani have been shifted out there at times. Odegaard's been out there. Johnson's been out there. There doesn't seem to be any consistency in the selection there. So we need to get somebody in there too. So in this window, I know it's going to be very difficult to do everything in one window, but I think a left back, a top midfielder, a top striker, and a top left-sided player on the attack is the priority positions. I know I'm asking a lot there, but it's Christmas, Chris. It's the time for miracles, as Alan Rickman said in Die Hard.
You're asking for a lot. You are asking for a lot. Now, this game, Crystal Palace v Spurs, of course, takes place on Sunday, the 28th of December, 4:30 p.m. kickoff at Selhurst Park. The referee for this game will be Jared Gillett. His assistants will be Scott Ledger and Mark Scholes. Fourth official, Darren England. And VAR, James Bell. Assistant VAR, Mark Perry. Gareth, lastly, let's talk about team selection. Let's talk about your predicted lineup and score prediction. As I said earlier, Javi Simmons will miss the next 3 games in the Premier League. And Romero, captain, is out of this one. Your predicted starting 11, what you think Thomas Frank will do, and if it is different, what you would like to see him do.
I think it's going to be very similar to what we predict here, because I think he's busted for options. If you've talked about the suspensions, the injuries, SARS at the AFCON as well, so there's very limited options. I think the back 4 will pick itself. Porro and Spence as the fullbacks, Danzo and Van de Ven. Vicario will stay in goal. The one I think he may bring Palhinha back in for this game. I think he'll give Archie Gray a break. I think that'll be the one. Palhinha and probably Bentancur will play in there. And I would imagine Bergville will play a bit higher up as a number 10. And then the front 3, I think he will change this as well. I think he'll go with Johnson on the right. I think he'll go with Richarlison through the middle. And I think he'll go with Odegaard on the left. Because I think Kudus has to come out of the team after that performance. I don't think he can play him after that performance against Liverpool. Odegaard and Richarlison made positive impacts, so I would imagine they come in. And Johnson also done better than Kudus, even though he didn't do an awful lot, but he done a bit more than Kudus. So I expect that to be the team, and I don't really know what else he could do this weekend, because he is busted for options.
There's so much emphasis, though, Gareth, on giving Mohamed Kudus the ball to create something for Spurs in the final third. How can you take a player like that out?
Well, I just think his performance against Liverpool was so poor that he has to come out. It was an unacceptable performance. Not willing to take people on, slowing the play down, going backwards, not really looking like he was interested. His body language was terrible. So I think he needs to be brought out of the team just to be taught a lesson that that is not accepted at this football club. You might have done it at West Ham, but you're not doing it here. We don't accept that. So I think we need to bring him out of the team and maybe bring him on in the second half and maybe mix an impact. Look, I haven't given up on him. I think he's a very, very good footballer, and I think on the performances he's shown in the first half, the first part of the season, he will be in this team. But I just think his performance against Liverpool was so poor that he needs to be dropped.
Gareth, lastly, Richarlison was, of course, a sub, came on, scored the goal against Liverpool at the weekend. Was that a little bit unfair on Richarlison being our top goal scorer?
I think he didn't have a great run of games there, didn't he? He was very poor in the last couple of games, but Miani's done absolutely nothing, Chris, really. So I'm not convinced. I mean, when he came in at the start, I thought there was something there with him, but gradually the performances have got worse. He's not really having an impact. At least Richarlison come on and caused a bit of chaos. We know his limitations as a player, but I think Richarlison comes back into the team, top goal scorer, and he made an impact in that game, and Miani drops to the bench. But I think there is a player there with Miani, but again, is it the manager, is it the style of play not suiting him? I have seen bits and pieces from him, but he didn't do anything against Liverpool, and Liverpool's defence is so poor. So I think Richarlison comes in. And look, I've just seen a team selection here, and they've gone very similar to what I say is Johnson and Richarlison and Odegaard. So I think that is probably the way Thomas Frank will go, and it probably should be the way he goes. But look, whatever we've said about injuries, suspensions, it can't be an excuse. Crystal Palace are in the exact same position. 4 games in 10 days, injuries to players, a Spurs team with the right attitude, the right mentality, and playing the right way would have a chance of winning this game on Sunday.
Before I get your score prediction, where do you see Oliver Glasner next season? Where do you see Thomas Frank next season? And league positions, who will finish higher in the league, Spurs or Palace?
Is that this season? He'll finish higher yet?
This season, yeah.
Crystal Palace will finish higher than Spurs. Do you know what? Thomas Frank could be Oliver Glasner's replacement if he's available, because Palace is a club that might suit him. They're not overly obsessed with that attacking football. They're if they're hard to beat and they're picking up wins and scoring goals in the counter attack and set pieces, I think that'll be accepted at Palace, to be honest. Glasner, it'd be interesting what the fan, would the fans like a swap there? Would the Tottenham fans be happy with Oliver Glasner? I'm not sure. I think Glasner could end up in Europe somewhere. I don't know if he will still be in the Premier League. I think it could be a European job out there for him. Where he ends up, I'm not sure. I think the signs are with United. He's been heavily linked with United over the recent months, but I think there's signs that Amram's starting to get things together there. So I think that window of opportunity may close. And I do expect Man United to finish in the top 5. So as long as the English teams do well in Europe, that'll be Champions League football. So I don't see them sacking him. I don't think Glazner would be the right fit for Liverpool. I very much expect Arteta to be at Arsenal. Pep, I think, may stay at Man City as well. Chelsea could be an interesting one. If he's going to move anywhere, possibly Chelsea, because I do think Spurs will be on the hunt for Pochettino. I really do. I think there's going to be a lot of juice in that in the summer after the World Cup. So I don't see him ending up at Spurs either.
Gareth, score prediction, Crystal Palace v Spurs on Sunday.
Well, look, it is a time of miracles, as we said, but I think it would be a miracle if we got a result here. I would love to be more positive, Chris, but I think it'll be a very dull game, and I think Palace will probably nick it 1-0.
I'm going to go for a draw. I haven't decided what sort of draw. 1-1, 2-2, 3-3. I just think it's got a draw written all over it. But obviously, I'm hoping that Spurs get back to winning ways and we start climbing up that Premier League table.
Chris, I would be absolutely delighted if we could get a 1 on Sunday, because it would give you confidence going into the Brentford game. Then that we can maybe follow that up with a 1, and Xavi Simons will be back for that game as well. But 2 big games, 2 massive games. I know this one is more important because it's next, Crystal Palace, but we desperately need at least, in my opinion, at least 4 points, 3 at the absolute worst. Anything less here, we're sitting with 2 draws, 1 draw and a defeat, or both defeats. I think the manager is going to find it very difficult to be in charge for that Sunderland game on the 4th of January. I really do. And if he is in charge, the atmosphere and the ground is going to be toxic. Because if we lose these 2 games, Chris, we could be 17th. And going into this Crystal Palace game, depending on the results, because we obviously play in the last game of the match round, we could be sitting 15th or 16th prior to kickoff. You don't know. So there's going to be huge pressure, and league position will determine. Spurs are sitting 17th on New Year's Day. The manager cannot remain in his position. He has to be relieved of his duties. And yes, it's unsettling, but we have to find a way to get through the season. And Chris, the one thing I would say is, if we are sitting in 17th and the stats are the same and we're struggling with shots on goal and it's crap football, what benefit would there what negative would there be of changing the manager? Because it couldn't get any worse, surely. It could not get any worse. Even if it was just an interim manager, I don't think they could do much worse than what's happening right now.
Gareth, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great Christmas. And I look forward to talking to you in a couple of days' time after the Christmas break, and talking about Matchweek 19, which these match weeks are coming around thick and fast.
They are coming around thick and fast, Chris. Thanks for having me on again. Almost at the halfway point of the season. Absolutely incredible, but great to see so many comments on the show tonight. Loads of people watching, and loads of people commenting and getting involved. And as Chris always says, feel free to throw in your predictions as well and get involved. Because it's always good to be interactive. It's a really good show, and we talk about all the teams. And Chris, thanks. It's been a great idea this season for this show. Loads of people are enjoying it. Actually, a lot of my mates actually watch this one because it's not just about Tottenham. So they see us talking about all the other teams as well. But look, as it says at the top of the show, let's get Christy 200,000 now, between now and Christmas Day. Let's get him up and give him a brilliant Christmas present of that 200k, because for all his dedication, his hard work, this man doesn't sleep. He does not sleep. He keeps going. And yeah, Chris, have a great Christmas with your family, and let's hope Tottenham give us something to cheer about over the Christmas period and New Year.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gareth, and thank you so much for all of your input during 2025. You've been absolutely great, and we have spoken for many, many hours, you and I, not only on these shows, but on the phone, face-to-face, at games, etc. And we've had some great moments during 2025 as well. Spending time together in Bilbao was a real highlight during 2025, so thank you so much for that. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening, and happy Christmas. Enjoy the festive period, and let's hope the Spurs can get back to winning ways on the 28th at Selhurst Park. Merry Christmas. Come on, you Spurs.